Today's lesson is a review of our class reading from the textbook on government in ancient Greece. Our lesson goals today are to be able to define different types of government, and we want to also understand democracy developing specifically in Athens. So for today's class, you need this lesson and your notes to be sure you have everything written correctly. We're going to start with our first form of government, and the first one we're going to talk about was the oligarchy. Our textbook definition of oligarchy is a government in which a small group of people rule. Oligarchs were similar to monarchs in that they were aristocrats, and in Greek, aristocrat means best men. What it really means is the wealthiest men. These oligarchs took power from monarchs. So you have a small group of aristocrats who are ruling over your city-state if your government is an oligarchy. These oligarchs are in control of all aspects of society. They're in control of the economy, the military, judicial system, and religion. The oligarchs' main focus was to create laws and rule in a way that benefited themselves and increased their wealth. Oligarchs often spent time making sure that they were getting richer, but that the poor were getting poorer. And this is going to be a common theme. Anytime in class we talk about the gap between the rich and poor growing, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, we can see that society or that government is going to start to run into some problems. And that happens to the oligarchy. This small group of oligarchs really made the poor regular man and the military upset. And so the oligarchs lose power to our next form of government, and that is the tyranny. In a tyranny, your leader is a tyrant. Initially, when the tyrants took over, they were loved by the people and they were supported by the people. However, over time, tyrants began to abuse their power and were overthrown. The definition of tyranny tells us that it's an unjust use of power, or in ancient Greece, a government run by a strong ruler. So you have one ruler who is leading. As I said, initially the tyrants were well accepted by the people and seemed to be a better fit for leading government than the oligarchs had been. However, over time, they began to upset the people. There's one story of an Athenian oligarch named Phalaris who would actually roast his rivals alive in a metallic bowl. And he had it designed specifically so as the people were placed inside the bowl and roasted, he could hear their shrieks coming from inside the bowl. So over time, we can see that these tyrants began to upset the people. And so in Athens, the people decided that they needed a new form of government, and that was a democracy. The Athenians wanted government where the people hold the power. So this is started in Athens. But when I say the people have the power, in the Athenian form of democracy, that doesn't mean all people have power. It means that only men have power. If you were a woman, a slave, or a non-Greek living in Athens, you are not contributing to this democracy at all. The Athenians also had written laws. These written laws were recorded by a leader named Draco. Draco's written laws were harsh and severe. And these are two videos that we watched in class that told us about how harsh and severe his punishments were. So you'd have a very similar punishment for stealing as you would for murder. And we also know that Draco had a pretty silly kind of death. He was so popular, ironically, even with his harsh and severe laws, that he's said to have died when his people cheered and threw so many of their cloaks in honor of him that he was suffocated. Now, when we talk about democracy, we're going to take a look at how the Athenian democracy is different than our democracy today. In Athens, remember, only citizens participated, and the government was called a direct democracy. That means citizens take part directly in the day to day affairs of government. This works in ancient Greece because city states were smaller and it was easier for people to participate. So, if you think about it, if you have to go and vote and participate in every discussion or issue that's arising, it works well if your city state geographically is small. One of our big things we talk about in seventh grade world studies is, why do we study this? What's the point? Well, we study this ancient Greek development of democracy because it impacts us as Americans. Because in America, we also have a democracy. The ancient Athenians develop a democracy, and we use this idea of democracy, but we have a different type of democracy. In America, we don't use the direct democracy of ancient Athens. We use what's called a representative democracy. And that's a government in which people elect representatives to make the nation's laws. So when your parents vote in elections, they select a senator and a representative to go to Congress. And when issues or laws are being voted on, the senator and the representatives vote for them. So a representative democracy works really well in the United States because the United States is really large. If your parents had to go to Washington, D.C. to vote every time the government voted on something, it would be very cumbersome. They would have to travel a far distance. They would have to take off work. So it really makes more sense for us to elect somebody else to go be in Washington and vote for us. So this is a quick overview of our textbook reading on government in ancient Greece. Please make sure you see your teacher with any questions that you may have. Thank you.